A specialized unit of military-trained K9 dogs was conducting a night exercise in the remote backwoods of Tennessee when they suddenly went off course, defying their handlers' commands. What these four remarkable Belgian Malinois discovered hidden in an abandoned property would change not just one man's life, but an entire community's understanding of loyalty and service. A decorated Afghanistan veteran, severely wounded and chained to a dying oak tree, had been left for dead by those he once trusted. But what these extraordinary dogs did next wasn't just unexpected, it was nothing short of miraculous. Their actions over the next 72 hours would bring hardened military personnel to tears and remind us all that sometimes the deepest form of courage comes from those who cannot speak, but somehow understand exactly what needs to be done. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn rain had been falling steadily for days, transforming the dense forests of eastern Tennessee into a treacherous landscape of mud, swollen creeks, and slick foliage. Few ventured into these remote areas during such conditions, but the weather provided ideal training scenarios for the specialized K9 unit stationed at Fort Campbell's Advanced K9 Training Division. 4 Belgian Malinois, Storm, Viper, Echo, and their lead dog, a battle-scarred veteran named Titan, moved with practiced precision through the darkness, their night vision gear enabling them to navigate the challenging terrain, while their handler, Sergeant Maya Reeves, monitored their movements from 50 yards back. This was their final certification exercise, independent search and rescue under adverse conditions. After 6 months of intensive training, these dogs represented the cutting edge of military K9 capabilities. Each had been selected for exceptional intelligence, physical prowess, and an almost preternatural ability to assess complex situations. They weren't just trained to follow commands. They were developed to make tactical decisions when human handlers couldn't be present to direct them. Maintain visual on all subjects. Maya spoke quietly into her communications device, keeping the base team updated. They're performing textbook maneuvers through Sector 7, approaching the abandoned Taylor property as planned. Captain, Daniel's voice crackled through her earpiece. Weather's deteriorating. Flash flood warnings just issued for neighboring counties. Consider extraction if conditions worsen. Understood, Maya replied, watching with pride as her team navigated a particularly steep ravine with seamless coordination. We should complete the exercise within 40 minutes, all subjects performing exceptionally. That's when something unexpected happened. Titan, the lead dog, suddenly raised his head, his posture shifting from focused determination to high alert. Without warning, he changed direction, veering sharply east, away from their planned route. Titan, maintain course, Maya commanded, her voice clear and authoritative through the specialized transmitter in the dog's tactical vest. For the first time in 3 years of working together, Titan ignored her command completely. Even more surprising, the other 3 dogs immediately followed his lead, moving with urgent purpose towards something only they could sense. We have an anomaly, Maya reported, quickening her pace to keep the team in view. All subjects have diverted from planned route, proceeding east toward the old Whitmore property, attempting to redirect. But the dogs moved with such determination that Maya knew something significant had triggered their behavior. These weren't ordinary animals prone to distraction. They were elite working dogs with thousands of hours of training. Their sudden unanimous deviation meant they had detected something their human handlers hadn't. The Whitmore property had been abandoned for nearly a decade, a failed farm reclaimed by nature after its elderly owner passed away with no heirs interested in maintaining it. Local authorities occasionally checked the property for squatters or illegal activity, but its remote location and deteriorating structures made it unappealing even to those desperate for shelter. As Maya followed her team through the undergrowth, the rain intensified, reducing visibility even with her night vision equipment. She lost sight of them momentarily as they crested a small hill, then quickened her pace as their signals on her tracking device clustered together, indicating they had stopped moving. When Maya finally caught up to them, she found all 4 dogs circled around the remains of a massive oak tree that had partially collapsed against an old shed. At first, in the darkness and rain, she couldn't understand what had captured their attention so completely. Then lightning flashed, illuminating the scene in stark relief. A man was bound to the tree trunk, his body slumped forward, restrained by heavy-duty chains wrapped multiple times around his torso and limbs. His military-style haircut was matted with blood, his face nearly unrecognizable beneath layers of bruises and caked mud. His clothing, what remained of it, appeared to be remnants of tactical gear, now shredded and soaked through. "Base, I have a situation," Maya reported immediately, her training overriding her shock. "Civilian casualty discovered at Whitmore property. Adult male, unconscious, evidence of severe trauma, restrained against his will. Requesting immediate medical, evacuation and MP support." As Maya carefully approached, Titan positioned himself protectively between her and the injured man, his posture communicating both vigilance and unusual concern. The other dogs had already taken defensive positions around the perimeter, exhibiting behavior typically reserved for protecting wounded team members in combat scenarios. Maya conducted a rapid assessment, conscious of maintaining scene integrity for the Inevita investigation. The man was alive but barely, his pulse weak and erratic, his breathing shallow. Hypothermia had set in, evidenced by his blue-tinged lips and ice-cold skin. But what disturbed her most were the signs of deliberate, calculated violence. Precision cuts along his ribcage, cigarette burns on his forearms, and methodical, blunt force trauma to non-lethal areas, hallmarks of prolonged interrogation techniques. These weren't random injuries from a typical assault. This was the work of someone with specialized knowledge of how to inflict maximum pain without causing immediate death. As she worked to cover him with her emergency thermal blanket, the man's eyes flickered open momentarily. Eyes that reflected not just physical agony, but profound betrayal. He managed just 3 words before losing consciousness again. "They have found me." Maya couldn't tell if he meant her team or whoever had done this to him, but there was no time to speculate. Her immediate priority was keeping him alive until the medical team arrived. What happened next defied all Maya's expectations of canine behavior, even from dogs as exceptional as these. Without command, Titan pressed his body against the man's, providing critical warmth to his core. Echo positioned himself at the man's feet, while Storm and Viper continued sentry duty, alternating their attention between the surrounding forest and the injured man. They weren't just guarding him. They were actively working to save his life, using their body heat to combat his hypothermia in a coordinated effort that suggested a level of intuitive understanding far beyond their training protocols. When the medical evacuation team arrived 20 minutes later, they had to work around the dogs, who refused to abandon their positions despite Maya's commands. Only when the man was stabilized on a stretcher did Titan finally stand down, allowing the medics to load the victim into the helicopter. But then all 4 dogs positioned themselves beside the stretcher, clearly communicating their intention to accompany him. "I've never seen anything like it," the lead medic told Maya as they prepared for transport. "It's like they've adopted him." "They've found him," Maya replied simply. In their minds, that makes him their responsibility. As the helicopter lifted, off, carrying both the injured man and the 4 dogs who had insisted on remaining with him, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just an isolated incident or random act of violence. The precision of the injuries, the remote location, the tactical restraints, everything suggested a carefully orchestrated event with potentially broader implications. What she didn't yet know was that the man her dogs had found was no ordinary civilian. Staff Sergeant James Barrett had been reported AWOL from Fort Campbell 3 days earlier after voicing concerns about irregularities he'd observed in supply shipments within his unit. His discovery would trigger an investigation that would uncover a network of corruption reaching far beyond the backwoods of Tennessee. But in this moment, as Maya watched the helicopter disappear into the rainy darkness, what mattered was that 4 remarkable dogs had not only found a forgotten soldier, but had somehow understood exactly what he needed when humanity had failed him completely. Their actions that night would be just the beginning of an extraordinary story of loyalty, healing, and justice that would eventually bring hardened military personnel to tears and change countless lives forever. Before continuing this remarkable journey, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. What unfolds next will challenge everything you thought you knew about the bonds between humans and these extraordinary animals, and the lengths to which true loyalty will go when confronted with darkness. The military hospital at Fort Campbell operated with the precise efficiency that defined all aspects of Army life. Doctors, nurses, and specialists moved purposefully through the sterile corridors. Their faces composed masks that revealed little of the emergencies they handled daily. But on this rainy October night, even the most seasoned medical personnel couldn't hide their reactions to the unusual scene unfolding in Trauma Bay 4. Staff Sergeant James Barrett lay unconscious on the examination table, medical staff working frantically to stabilize his condition, while 4 Belgian Malinois maintained positions at each corner of the room. The dogs were motionless, yet vigilant, their intelligent eyes tracking every movement around their discovered charge with unnerving focus. "I need those animals out of my trauma bay," Dr. Eliza Washington demanded, not looking up from her assessment of Barrett's extensive injuries. "Military working dogs or not, this is a sterile environment." Colonel Robert Thorne, base veterinarian and head of the K9 training division, had been summoned to handle the unusual situation. "With all due respect, Doctor, I wouldn't recommend attempting to remove them. These aren't ordinary service animals." "I don't care if they're K9 brain surgeons," Dr. Washington countered. "They're compromising my patient's care environment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. "Correction," Colonel Thorne replied quietly. "They're the only reason your patient is still alive. Their body heat prevented fatal hypothermia, and they maintained a defensive perimeter until evacuation arrived. They've adopted him as pack, and their behavior suggests they've entered Guardian Protocol, something we've documented but rarely witnessed outside combat zones." The senior physician paused, glancing at the dogs with newfound consideration. "Fine, but they get scrubbed down with antiseptic wipes, and they maintain their current distance. First sign of interference with medical procedures, they're out." The compromise established, the medical team continued their assessment. Barrett's condition was critical, but stable. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, 4 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, multiple lacerations requiring sutures, and extensive contusions covering nearly 40% of his body. His tox screen revealed traces of a sophisticated cocktail of drugs typically associated with enhanced interrogation, chemicals that increased pain sensitivity while maintaining consciousness. "This wasn't random violence," Dr. Washington observed grimly. "These injuries were systematically inflicted over approximately 48 to 72 hours. Whoever did this knew exactly how to maximize pain without causing immediate death." As nurses cleaned the caked blood and mud from Barrett's battered face, his identity triggered immediate alerts throughout the chain of command. Staff Sergeant James Barrett, 31, had served 3 combat tours in Afghanistan with distinction, earning multiple decorations including a Silver Star for Valor Under Fire. More recently, he'd transferred to logistics management at Fort Campbell, overseeing equipment allocation for specialized training operations. 3 days ago, he had failed to report for duty, highly uncharacteristic for a soldier with an impeccable service record. His vehicle had been found abandoned near the base's south entrance, personal effects untouched. The military police had classified him as AWOL pending investigation, though his commanding officer had immediately expressed skepticism about Barrett voluntarily abandoning his post. Beyond the trauma bay, Sergeant Maya Reeves provided her initial report to the gathering military police investigators, describing how her K9 team had located Barrett against all probability. In 15 years of working with military dogs, I've never seen behavior like this, she explained. They diverted from a carefully plotted training course, ignored direct commands, and proceeded almost 2 miles off course directly to his location. There's no logical explanation for how they detected his presence at that distance, through dense forest, in heavy rainfall. Captain Jessica Wells, lead MP investigator, tapped her pen thoughtfully against her notepad. Could they have been responding to scent markers, blood in the water supply, perhaps carried downstream? Maya shook her head. Possible, but extremely unlikely, given the distance and weather conditions. And that doesn't explain their behavior. After locating him, the protective formation, the body heat sharing, their refusal to leave his side during evacuation, these dogs are trained for detection and apprehension, not medical support. They essentially improvised trauma care. Captain Wells glanced through the observation window at Barrett's unconscious form. And the victim said, "They found me when you discovered him. Any indication of who they might be?" "None. He lost consciousness immediately after speaking, but based on the nature of his injuries." Maya hesitated. "Speak freely, Sergeant." Wells encouraged. "Those wounds are consistent with tactical interrogation techniques, not standard criminal torture. This was methodical, designed to extract information while keeping the subject alive and conscious. Someone with specialized training did this." The implication hung heavy in the air. If Barrett had been tortured by individuals with military or intelligence background, this case extended far beyond a simple assault investigation. Inside the trauma room, as medical staff prepared Barrett for transfer to intensive care, the lead dog Titan suddenly raised, his head, ears alert. The other 3 Malinois immediately mirrored his posture, their attention focusing on the corridor outside the trauma bay. Dr. Washington noticed the shift. "What is it? What are they reacting to?" Colonel Thorne watched the dogs with professional interest. Someone's coming, someone they perceive as a threat. Moments later, 2 men in Army combat uniforms approached the trauma bay. Major Daniel Hoffman, Barrett's commanding officer, and First Sergeant Wesley Payne, the Logistics Division's senior non-commissioned officer. As they reached the doorway, all 4 dogs moved silently into blocking positions, low growls emanating from their throats. "Hold position," Colonel Thorne ordered sharply, extending an arm to prevent the officers from entering. "Something's wrong." Major Hoffman frowned. "With all due respect, Colonel, I need to check on my soldier. Stand down these animals immediately." Before Thorne could respond, Titan's growl intensified, his eyes locked specifically on First Sergeant Payne. The other dogs spread out in tactical formation, creating a protective barrier between the visitors and Barrett's bed. "These dogs are specifically reacting to you, First Sergeant," Colonel Thorne observed, his voice neutral but his expression calculating. "May I ask if you're carrying any unusual scents? Gunpowder residue? Chemical agents? Anything that might trigger their defensive protocols?" Payne's face remained impassive. "Nothing unusual, Colonel. Standard duty day, standard equipment." Dr. Washington stepped forward, her patience clearly wearing thin. "I don't have time for canine theatrics. My patient needs to be transferred to ICU." "One moment, Doctor," Captain Wells interjected, having observed the interaction from nearby. "Colonel Thorne, in your professional opinion, what's happening here?" Thorne studied the dog's behavior with clinical precision. "These are extremely specialized animals with enhanced threat detection capabilities. They're exhibiting targeted defensive behavior, specifically toward First Sergeant Payne. That suggests they perceive him, and only him, as a direct threat to Barrett." "That's ridiculous," Major Hoffman objected. "First Sergeant Payne has been leading the search effort since Barrett went missing." Captain Wells's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Has he? Interesting, since the MP reports show the missing persons alert was only filed yesterday morning, nearly 48 hours after Barrett failed to report for duty." A subtle tension filled the corridor as Wells continued, "And I find it curious that you both arrived so quickly, considering Barrett's identity was only confirmed 30 minutes ago, and no notifications have been issued through official channels." First Sergeant Payne's right hand drifted subtly toward his sidearm, a movement so slight it might have gone unnoticed by human observers. But Titan's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. The Belgian Malinois launched forward with explosive speed, positioning himself directly between Payne and Barrett, his posture communicating absolute readiness to attack. "Stand down, soldier," Wells commanded sharply, her own hand moving to her weapon. "Remove your hand from your sidearm and explain why you're armed in a medical facility, contrary to base regulations." The corridor froze in tense silence as Payne slowly raised his hands. "Standard security precaution, Captain. Given the sensitive nature of Barrett's work, we believed there might be external threats." "The only threat these highly trained animals seem to perceive is you, First Sergeant," Wells observed coldly. "I find that extraordinarily interesting. MP detailed to Trauma Bay 4 immediately." As additional military police officers arrived to secure the scene, medical staff seized the opportunity to transfer Barrett to intensive care, the 4 Belgian Malinois maintaining their protective formation throughout the move. With Barrett safely installed in a secure ICU room, the dogs established positions around his bed, their vigilance unwavering despite their own obvious exhaustion. Late that evening, as Barrett remained in medically induced sedation, Maya Reeves sat quietly in the corner of his room, observing her K9 team with mixture of pride and bewilderment. These animals had not only defied their training to find a man they had no logical way of locating, but had potentially exposed a conspiracy within the ranks simply through their instinctive response to perceived threat. "What did you sense that we missed?" she whispered to Titan, who acknowledged her with a brief glance before returning his attention to Barrett. "How did you know?" Outside in the corridor, investigators were piecing together a disturbing picture. Barrett's personal effects, retrieved from his locker, included a carefully documented log of discrepancies in weapons shipments, specialized equipment being diverted from official channels, seemingly authorized by First Sergeant Payne's electronic signature. The dates coincided with several black market weapons seizures in neighboring states, suggesting an organized smuggling operation using military supply chains as cover. If Barrett had discovered evidence of this operation, it would explain the desperate attempt to silence him and the professional, methodical nature of his torture. His captors had needed to know what evidence he had gathered and who he might have shared it with before eliminating him. What they couldn't have anticipated was the intervention of 4 extraordinary dogs who somehow sensed a fellow soldier in peril, located him against impossible odds, and then identified one of his attackers through some combination of scent recognition and instinctive threat assessment that defied conventional explanation. As the first light of dawn filtered through the hospital blinds, Barrett's vital signs began to strengthen. The most critical danger had passed, though his road to full recovery would be long and arduous. Maya watched as Titan rested his head gently on the edge of Barrett's bed, the dog's eyes never leaving the soldier's face, despite his own obvious exhaustion. In that quiet moment, she understood that she was witnessing something transcendent, a demonstration of loyalty and protective instinct so profound it had overcome training, distance, and rational explanation. These dogs hadn't just found a missing soldier. They had possibly uncovered a criminal conspiracy and certainly saved a life that by all logical measures should have been lost. What none of them yet realized was that the event set in motion by the dog's remarkable actions would expose corruption extending far beyond a simple weapons smuggling operation. Barrett's discoveries had only scratched the surface of a network that reached into the highest levels of military logistics, and the desperate attempt to silence him was just the beginning of a struggle that would test the limits of loyalty, courage, and justice in the days to come. But for now, as Barrett's breathing strengthened and his first tentative movements suggested returning consciousness, what mattered most was the circle of protection formed by 4 extraordinary animals, who had somehow known exactly where to find him and exactly what he needed when human systems had failed completely. The intensive care unit maintained its hushed efficiency as morning light strengthened beyond the windows. Military medical staff moved with quiet purpose, their routines occasionally disrupted by curious glances toward room 217, where an unprecedented scenario continued to unfold. Inside, Staff Sergeant James Barrett remained under sedation, his battered body showing the first subtle signs of healing beneath layers of bandages and monitoring equipment. The 4 Belgian Malinois had maintained their vigilant positions throughout the night, accepting water and minimal sustenance from Sergeant Maya Reeves, but refusing opportunities for rest or exercise away from Barrett's bedside. Military veterinarians observed their behavior with professional fascination, documenting what appeared to be a coordinated rotation system the dogs had established without human direction, 3 maintaining alert positions while 1 rested. Briefly, cycling throughout the night in precise 90-minute intervals. At 0847 hours, Barrett's vital signs showed a distinct shift. His heartbeat strengthened, respiration deepened, and brain activity patterns indicated a transition toward consciousness. Dr. Washington entered to assess his condition, moving deliberately, under the watchful eyes of the canine guardians. "He's emerging from sedation earlier than expected," she noted, reviewing the monitor readouts. "Remarkable resilience, considering the trauma his system endured." Maya, who had refused her commander's suggestion to return to barracks for rest, straightened in her chair. "Is that a good sign?" "Cautiously optimistic," Dr. Washington replied. "His core functions are stabilizing, and preliminary blood work shows no sign of organ damage from the hypothermia or chemical exposure. We don't know what psychological state we'll encounter when he regains consciousness, however. The combination of physical trauma, exposure, and whatever happened during his captivity, he's likely to experience significant disorientation." As if responding to their discussion, Barrett's fingers twitched slightly, followed by a subtle change in his breathing pattern. Titan immediately rose from his position, moving closer to the bed with focused attention, his ears forward and alert. "Remarkable," Dr. Washington murmured. "The dog sensed the change before our monitoring equipment registered it." Barrett's eyelids fluttered, then opened partially, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as awareness returned. His initial reaction was instantaneous and violent, his body tensing to fight against restraints that were no longer there. A hoarse sound escaping his throat as hands clutched desperately at the sheets. Before either woman could intervene, Titan pressed his body against Barrett's side, placing his head carefully but firmly on the soldier's chest. The effect was immediate and profound. Barrett froze, his panicked movements ceasing as his gaze fixed on the dog. Several seconds passed in absolute stillness, then the tension visibly drained from Barrett's body, his hand shakily rising to rest on Titan's head. "Safe," he whispered, his voice rough from dehydration and strain. "You found me." Dr. Washington approached slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Sergeant Barrett, I'm Dr. Eliza Washington. You're in the military hospital at Fort Campbell. You're safe now." Barrett's eyes moved from Titan to the doctor, then to Maya, confusion evident in his expression. "How?" he began, then winced as the effort of speaking aggravated his injured throat. "These dogs found you," Maya explained, stepping closer, while gesturing toward the Malinois team. "They were on a training exercise when they diverted from their course and led us directly to your location at the abandoned Whitmore property. You'd been there approximately 60 hours based on our assessment." Barrett's gaze returned to Titan, something like wonder crossing his features despite his obvious pain. "Not possible," he whispered. "Too far. No trail." "We know," Maya acknowledged. "There's no logical explanation for how they located you. But they did, and they've refused to leave your side since, even identifying one of your attackers when he attempted to access your room." Barrett's body tensed again, his heartbeat spiking on the monitor. "Payne," he stated, more clarity entering. His voice, "First Sergeant Payne." "He's in custody," Dr. Washington assured him quickly. "Military police detained him last night after these dogs reacted defensively to his presence. Subsequent investigation discovered evidence in your personal effects suggesting his involvement in weapons smuggling operations." A dark understanding filled Barrett's eyes. "Not just weapons," he managed, each word clearly causing him discomfort. "Personnel files, deployment schedules, classified operation details. They're selling everything." Maya exchanged alarmed glances. With Dr. Washington, what Barrett was describing extended far beyond simple weapons smuggling. This was potentially a massive security breach, with implications for active military operations and personnel safety. "Sergeant Barrett," Maya said carefully, "you need rest to recover, but Captain Wells from MP Investigations will need your statement as soon as you're medically cleared. If there's an active threat to operational security—" "3 days," Barrett interrupted, his voice strengthening despite his obvious discomfort. "3-day window to move next shipment. Heard them discussing it while—" He faltered, memories of his torture briefly overwhelming his composure. Titan responded immediately to Barrett's distress, pressing closer and issuing a soft whine that seemed to ground the injured soldier. The other 3 Malinois shifted their positions subtly, moving into a tighter protective formation around the bed. Barrett took a shuddering breath, visibly drawing strength from the dog's presence. "Need to speak to Colonel Marcus Harrison, Intelligence Division. Directly. No intermediaries." Dr. Washington frowned. "Sergeant, you've suffered severe trauma. Your immediate priority should be recovery." "With respect, Doctor," Barrett countered, his military bearing reasserting itself despite his injuries. "What I discovered before. They took me involves active threats to deployed personnel. The information can't wait." The determination in his voice was unmistakable. Despite his battered physical state, the soldier's mind was clearly functioning with surprising clarity, a resilience that impressed even the veteran physician. "I'll arrange for Captain Wells and a secured communication line," Maya volunteered. "The dogs and I will maintain security here." As Maya stepped into the corridor to make the necessary calls, she found Captain Wells already approaching, her expression grimly purposeful. "How is he?" Wells asked without preamble. "Conscious and remarkably lucid," Maya reported. He's confirmed Payne's involvement and indicated the situation extends beyond weapons smuggling to include classified operational information. He's requesting direct contact with Colonel Harrison from intelligence. Wells nodded, unsurprised. That tracks with what we've uncovered so far. Payne's electronic devices contained encrypted communications with multiple contacts outside military channels. Cyberforensics is working on breaking the encryption, but preliminary analysis suggests he's part of a sophisticated network. Barrett mentioned a 3-day window for the next shipment, Maya added urgently. We know. That's why I'm here. Wells lowered her voice, ensuring they wouldn't be overheard. Payne was found dead in his holding cell 40 minutes ago, made to look like suicide, but the surveillance footage shows a guard deviation from standard protocols. We have a serious breach in security, extending into the MP division itself. Maya processed this disturbing development with professional composure. How are we proceeding? Colonel Harrison is implementing a compartmentalized investigation. Minimal. Personnel need-to-know basis only. Barrett's survival was unexpected. His captors obviously believed they'd left him to die in a location where he wouldn't be found until long after the shipment was complete. Wells glanced toward Barrett's room. Those dogs didn't just save his life. They've potentially given us the only opportunity to intercept this operation before irreparable damage is done to national security. Inside the ICU room, Barrett was already pushing himself to a more upright position despite Dr. Washington's objections. The dogs adjusted their positions accordingly, maintaining their protective formation while accommodating his movement. You need to understand what we're dealing with, Barrett explained to the doctor, his voice gaining strength with each passing minute. These aren't opportunistic criminals. They're highly organized, with specialized training and deep connections within military logistics systems. I only discovered their operation by accident, shipment discrepancies that didn't match any authorized covert operations. Dr. Washington's expression remained skeptical. And they responded by abducting and torturing an Army staff sergeant. Rather than simply transferring you to another division, that seems disproportionate. Because I made a mistake, Barrett admitted, regret evident in his face. Instead of reporting through standard channels immediately, I gathered more evidence. First, traced financial transactions, documented pattern deviations, identified key personnel. By the time they realized I was investigating, I had assembled a comprehensive dossier. Understanding dawned in the doctor's expression. They needed to know how much you'd discovered and who else might know. Barrett nodded grimly. 3 days of interrogation. They were thorough, professional. When they finished, they left me to die from exposure, a tragic case of a soldier with PTSD wandering into the woods, succumbing to the elements. No connection to them. He turned his attention back to Titan, who remained vigilantly positioned beside him. What I still don't understand is how these dogs found me. The location was deliberately remote, weather conditions were adverse, and I had no prior contact with this K9 unit. There's no logical explanation. Dr. Washington's scientific mind had been grappling with the same question. There are documented cases of working dogs detecting human distress at considerable distances, particularly in individuals with whom they've bonded. But nothing in the literature explains this scenario. No prior connection, extreme distance, adverse environmental conditions. Barrett studied the dogs with newfound appreciation. Military working dogs never cease to amaze me. In Afghanistan, we had a Belgian Malinois named Rex attached to our forward operating base. Saved our unit twice from hidden IEDs that standard detection had missed. Something shifted in Barrett's expression, a sudden realization dawning. Wait, Rex. Handler named Carson, 5th Special Forces. Maya, returning from the corridor, overheard the question. You knew Carson? Served with him for 6 months in Kandahar province, Barrett confirmed, a new intensity in his voice. Rex was his partner, distinctive scar over his right eye from a previous deployment injury. Maya's eyes widened slightly as she glanced at Titan, who watched the exchange with characteristic alertness, the distinctive scar over his right eye catching the morning light. Titan was transferred to our training division 2 years ago, she said slowly. His previous deployment history listed multiple combat rotations, including Kandahar. His original handler was killed in action, after which he had difficulty bonding with new handlers until joining our specialized unit. Barrett stared at Titan with dawning comprehension. Carson didn't make it home from our last mission together. Rex, Titan, was reassigned afterward. He reached out with trembling fingers, gently touching the scar above the dog's eye. You remember, don't you? Different name now, but same warrior. The room fell silent as the implications registered. Against staggering odds, the dog who had once served alongside Barrett in combat had somehow sensed his presence years later in entirely different circumstances and led a rescue team directly to his location. The bond between military working dogs and the soldiers they serve with transcends our current scientific understanding, Maya said quietly. We train them using sophisticated techniques, but what they give in return, their loyalty, their instincts, their capacity for connection, goes beyond anything we could program. Captain Wells entered the room, her expression professionally composed despite the urgency of the situation. Sergeant Barrett, we need your complete statement. Colonel Harrison is establishing a secure operation to intercept the shipment you mentioned, but we need every detail you can provide. Barrett straightened further, military discipline overriding physical discomfort. I'll provide everything I know. He glanced at the 4 dogs, maintaining their vigilant positions around him. But I want this K9 unit involved in the operation. They've already demonstrated capabilities beyond our standard protocols, and their instincts have proven more reliable than our human systems. Wells hesitated only briefly before nodding. Colonel Harrison has already requested their participation, along with Sergeant Reeves. Based on the breach we've identified within regular channels, this operation requires unconventional assets. As the military hospital continued its regular rhythms beyond the secure room, Barrett began providing his detailed account of the smuggling operation he'd uncovered. Throughout his debriefing, Titan remained pressed against his side, the dog's unwavering presence seeming to fortify the injured soldier's strength and clarity despite his physical trauma. What none of them fully realized yet was that the connection between Barrett and Titan, a bond forged in combat years earlier and somehow maintained across time and distance, would prove instrumental in the dangerous operation unfolding over the next 72 hours. A mission where conventional intelligence would prove compromised, and the extraordinary instincts of 4 remarkable dogs would ultimately mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. But for now, as Barrett methodically reconstructed the criminal network he'd uncovered, what mattered most was the simple, profound truth embodied in the Belgian Malinois keeping watch over him. Some bonds transcend explanation, some loyalty defies conventional understanding, and sometimes the most reliable allies are those who serve without seeking recognition or reward. The secured conference room in Fort Campbell's intelligence division hummed with focused activity as dawn approached on the second day. Digital displays covered the walls, satellite imagery, personnel files, intercepted communications, and logistics schedules, all components of the hastily assembled but meticulously planned Operation Broken Chain. At the center of this controlled chaos, despite medical advice to the contrary, sat Staff Sergeant James Barrett. His appearance remained a stark testament to his ordeal. Face still swollen from systematic beatings, movements careful to accommodate broken ribs and sutured lacerations. voice occasionally failing from damage inflicted during his interrogation. Yet his mind functioned with remarkable precision, identifying connections and operational patterns that even specialized intelligence analysts had overlooked. The key isn't the weapons, Barrett explained, indicating a complex diagram of supply, routes displayed on the main screen. Those are just the most profitable component. What makes this operation truly dangerous is the intelligence being sold alongside the hardware, troop movements, operational timelines, personnel vulnerabilities. Colonel Marcus Harrison, a tall, austere figure with 30 years of military intelligence experience, studied the display with narrowed eyes. "You're suggesting this network has compromised our secure communication channels?" "Not suggesting. Oh, sir, confirming," Barrett corrected respectfully. "The intercepted communications from First Sergeant Payne's devices show specific knowledge of classified operations in 3 different theaters. Knowledge that was compartmentalized, accessible only to personnel with specific clearance levels." Beside Barrett, Titan maintained his now familiar protective position, the Belgian Malinois' attention divided between his reunited companion and the room's occupants. The other 3 dogs, Storm, Viper, and Echo, had been temporarily reassigned to perimeter security under handler supervision, their extraordinary sensory capabilities providing an additional layer of protection against potential infiltration. Captain Jessica Wells approached the central table with a tablet displaying forensic analysis results. Cybersecurity has completed their preliminary assessment of the encrypted communications. They've identified at least 12 active military personnel potentially involved in the network, spanning 3 bases, including Fort Campbell, which explains how they were able to abduct Barrett so efficiently and evade initial search efforts. Sergeant Maya Reeves observed. They had inside knowledge of schedules, procedures, and search protocols. Colonel Harrison's expression remained impassive, but his voice carried controlled fury. "And now they've eliminated Payne before he could be properly interrogated. A calculated risk that suggests their operation holds priority over protecting their own." Barrett shifted painfully in his chair, unconsciously resting his hand on Titan's head in a gesture that seemed to steady both of them. "The timeline is what concerns me most, sir. Based on the conversations I overheard during my captivity, the next shipment represents their largest transfer yet. Not just weapons, but comprehensive intelligence packets on active special operations. Teams in 3 regions. Giving our enemies everything they need to compromise missions and target our people," Harrison concluded grimly. "Potentially devastating casualties if this intelligence reaches its destination." The room fell silent as the full implications registered. This wasn't just a criminal enterprise. It was a direct threat to deployed service members' lives, brothers and sisters in arms who would be rendered vulnerable if the shipment proceeded as planned. 48 hours remaining until the scheduled transfer, Wells noted, checking the mission timeline. "Our window for intervention is narrowing." Harrison surveyed the assembled team, a deliberately small group to minimize potential security breaches. "We have 2 primary objectives: intercept the physical shipment and identify every member of this network, particularly the leadership. Conventional approaches are compromised due to the network's infiltration of standard channels." "Which is why we need an unconventional approach," Barrett suggested, straightening despite obvious discomfort. "One they won't anticipate because it falls outside standard operational parameters." Maya caught his meaning immediately. "The K9 unit." Barrett nodded, his gaze meeting Colonel Harrison's. "Sir, these dogs have already demonstrated capabilities beyond our established protocols. They located me when conventional search methods failed, identified First Sergeant Payne as a threat despite his position of authority, and maintained security protocols without handler direction. I believe they represent our best chance for mission success." Harrison considered the proposal with characteristic thoroughness. As a career intelligence officer, he had witnessed enough inexplicable battlefield phenomena to keep an open mind about capabilities that defied conventional explanation. You're suggesting we build our operation around the K9 unit rather than using them as supplementary assets, he clarified. Yes, sir. Specifically, I believe Titan should take point. Barrett looked down at the Belgian Malinois, who met his gaze with focused intensity. His connection to this situation transcends standard training. The fact that we served together in Afghanistan before his reassignment can't be coincidence, not with how he located me and has responded since. Maya provided supporting analysis. From her professional perspective, from a handler's viewpoint, I've documented behavioral patterns in this unit that exceed our established capabilities matrix. Their coordinated responses, threat identification, and decision-making in non-standard scenarios suggest cognitive processes beyond our current understanding of canine capabilities. Colonel Harrison didn't dismiss the unconventional proposal outright, which surprised the junior officers present. Instead, he addressed Barrett directly. "What specifically are you proposing, Sergeant?" Barrett leaned forward, energy and purpose momentarily overshadowing his physical injuries. "A two-phase operation using the K9 unit as our principal intelligence, gathering and tactical asset. Phase 1, controlled exposure of the dogs to materials associated with the smuggling operation to establish scent and behavioral baselines. Phase 2, deployment of the unit to independently identify target locations, personnel, and materials through sensory capabilities that can't be compromised by human infiltration." The proposal was unorthodox by any standard military procedure, yet the circumstances were equally unprecedented. A deeply embedded criminal network with access to classified channels and protocols operating within the military's own infrastructure. "The dogs operate outside the compromised chain of command," Wells noted, recognizing the strategic advantage. "They can't be bribed, threatened, or misled through conventional means. Their loyalty is biologically hardwired, not administratively assigned." Harrison's gaze shifted to Maya. "Sergeant Reeves, as the handling expert, what's your assessment of mission viability using this approach?" Maya's response was measured but confident. "Under normal circumstances, I would consider it high risk with unpredictable variables. But what we've witnessed over the past 36 hours with this unit, particularly Titan's behavior, suggests capabilities that exceed our standard operational parameters. I believe it's viable, sir." The colonel made his decision with characteristic efficiency. "Proceed with preparation for the two-phase approach. Captain Wells, coordinate with Sergeant Reeves to establish the necessary protocols and fallback contingencies. Sergeant Barrett," he paused, eyeing the injured soldier's condition, "you'll serve as operational advisor from Command Center. Your medical status precludes field deployment." Barrett began to protest, but was interrupted by Dr. Washington's entrance into the conference room. The physician surveyed the scene with professional disapproval. "I agreed to limited consultation activities, Colonel Harrison, not an extended strategic planning session. Sergeant Barrett's condition requires continued medical monitoring and rest." "With respect, Doctor," Barrett countered, determination evident despite his weakened state. "This operation directly impacts the safety of deployed personnel. My first-hand knowledge is essential to mission planning." Dr. Washington was unswayed. "Your first-hand knowledge won't matter if you collapse from pushing your recovery too far, too fast. Your body has sustained significant trauma, including potential neurological impacts from the chemicals used during your captivity." Colonel Harrison, accustomed to balancing operational necessities against personnel welfare, offered a compromise. 2-hour rotations, Doctor. Sergeant Barrett provides consultation for 2 hours, then returns to medical supervision for 1 hour, continuing until operation completion. Will that satisfy medical protocols?" The physician considered the proposal, then nodded reluctantly. Acceptable, provided vital signs remain stable and pain management is maintained. I'll assign a medic to monitor his condition throughout. As the planning session resumed with these new parameters, Barrett found himself studying Titan with renewed appreciation. The dog had maintained constant vigilance since their reunion, seemingly attuned to Barrett's physical and emotional state in ways that transcended standard training. "You recognized me, didn't you?" he murmured quietly during a brief lull in the strategic discussion. "After all these years, something connected us when I needed it most." Titan's intelligent eyes remained fixed on Barrett, his posture communicating alertness without tension, the balanced readiness of an experienced combat veteran. Whatever mysterious connection had enabled the dog to find Barrett against impossible odds remained active between them, a silent communication channel built on shared experiences in another time and place. The planning session continued with methodical precision, each team member contributing specialized expertise to the unorthodox operation. Evidence collected from Barrett's personal effects and Payne's confiscated devices provided initial targeting parameters, while satellite imagery identified potential transfer locations based on the limited intelligence available. As the mission framework took shape, Maya implemented the first phase of Barrett's proposed approach, introducing the K9 unit to materials associated with the smuggling operation. The dogs were systematically exposed to clothing fibers, equipment, components, and documentation recovered from Barrett's investigation, establishing sensory baselines that would guide their field operations. Most remarkable was Titan's response to these materials, not just standard recognition, but what appeared to be cognitive processing, connecting disparate elements into a comprehensive understanding of the target profile. The dog moved methodically between samples, building what handlers referred to as a scent picture of the operation with unusual thoroughness. "He's making connections," Maya observed with professional fascination, not just identifying individual components, but synthesizing them into a coherent pattern. Barrett, watching from his position at the planning table, nodded. In Afghanistan, he demonstrated similar capabilities during complex IED detection scenarios. Carson, his original handler, called it contextual awareness. Titan doesn't just detect individual elements, he understands their relationship within a larger tactical situation. Colonel Harrison, initially skeptical of building an operation around K9 capabilities, found his doubt eroding as he observed the dog's systematic approach to the evidence materials. "How much of this is standard training, Sergeant Reeves?" "The baseline recognition protocols are standard, sir," Maya explained. "But the integrative processing, the contextual synthesis they're displaying, that's well beyond established capabilities. We train for detection and response. What we're witnessing here is closer to analytical reasoning." As the first day of mission preparation concluded, the operation had taken shape, a carefully orchestrated deployment built around the K9 unit's unique capabilities, supported by minimal human assets to reduce the risk of compromise. The dogs would serve as the primary intelligence and identification mechanism, with handler support focusing on security and evidence collection rather than operational direction. Barrett's condition necessitated his return to medical supervision, though he continued contributing to mission planning during his designated consultation periods. Throughout the preparation phase, Titan maintained his position as Barrett's protector and companion, returning to the operations center with Barrett during each consultation rotation. "The bond you've established with him is remarkable, Doctor," Washington commented during one medical assessment, observing how Titan's presence seemed to stabilize Barrett's vital signs during particularly painful treatment procedures. His awareness of your physical state exceeds anything I've seen in standard service animals. Barrett managed a pained smile as the doctor rechecked his sutured lacerations. It's mutual. In Afghanistan, during particularly stressful operations, Carson would notice that Titan always positioned himself closer to me than other team members. Said the dog seemed to sense I needed the support, even though I never showed it outwardly. The physician considered this with scientific curiosity. There's growing research suggesting certain individuals emit distinct biochemical signatures during trauma or stress that some animals can detect. Perhaps your previous connection established a recognition pattern that persisted over time. Maybe, Barrett acknowledged, or maybe some bonds just transcend our understanding. As night fell on the second day of preparation, Operation Broken Chain stood ready for implementation. The K9 unit had completed intensive familiarization with all available intelligence, working in coordinated patterns that suggested strategic comprehension beyond conventional training outcomes. Human assets were positioned strategically, with communications protocols established outside standard military channels to prevent interception. Colonel Harrison conducted a final briefing in the Secure Operations Center, addressing the assembled team with characteristic directness. This operation represents an unprecedented approach to a critical threat scenario. We're placing primary operational trust in the capabilities of our K9 assets, supported by minimal human intervention to reduce compromise risk. He surveyed the room, his gaze lingering momentarily on Barrett, who had insisted on being present for the deployment. Despite his medical restrictions, our objective remains unchanged: intercept the scheduled shipment, secure all intelligence materials, and identify every member of this network. Success means preserving the safety of countless deployed personnel who would be compromised by this intelligence breach. As the team prepared for deployment, Barrett found a private moment to connect with Titan. Kneeling painfully to bring himself to eye level with the Belgian Malinois, he rested his forehead briefly against the dog's. "You found me when it mattered most," he said quietly. "Now we need you to find them, to protect our brothers and sisters who don't even know they're in danger." Titan's focus was absolute, his posture communicating readiness without needing human commands or direction. Whatever extraordinary connection had enabled him to locate Barrett against impossible odds now seemed channeled toward their new mission, a shared purpose transcending the boundaries between human and K9 understanding. As the K9 unit moved toward deployment, Barrett watched from the operations center, his expression reflecting both concern and complete confidence. These remarkable animals had already accomplished what conventional wisdom deemed impossible once. Now, the lives of countless service members depended on their ability to do so again. The operation was officially underway, an unconventional approach to an unprecedented threat, guided by the extraordinary capabilities of 4 remarkable dogs who had already demonstrated that some bonds transcend explanation and some instincts reach beyond the limits of human understanding. Under the cover of pre-dawn darkness, Operation Broken Chain deployed across 3 strategically selected zones surrounding Fort Campbell. The autumn air carried a biting chill, with fog settling in low-lying areas, challenging conditions for conventional surveillance, but ideal for the enhanced sensory capabilities of the K9 unit. Sergeant Maya Reeves coordinated the operation from a modified command vehicle positioned at the central deployment point, maintaining secure communication with the 3 handler dog teams distributed across the target area. Colonel Harrison had authorized an unconventional command structure for this mission. The handlers would follow the dog's lead rather than directing their movements, a reversal of standard protocol that acknowledged the unique nature of this operation. "Team Alpha in position at the eastern perimeter," reported Specialist Dawson, handler for Storm. maintaining minimal radio contact as instructed. Team Bravo established at southwestern approach, confirmed Corporal Rodriguez, paired with Echo. No unusual activity detected in sector. Team Charlie holding at northern checkpoint, added Specialist Chen, handling Viper. Civilian traffic minimal at this hour. From the Secure Operations Center, Staff Sergeant Barrett monitored the deployment through encrypted video feeds displayed across multiple screens. Despite Dr. Washington's objections, he had insisted on maintaining oversight throughout the critical initial phase. Titan remained with him, the only member of the K9 unit not deployed to the field, a concession Barrett had reluctantly accepted after Colonel Harrison pointed out that the dog's established bond with him created a potential operational vulnerability. Each team has a 15-kilometer search radius, Meyer explained through the secure channel. Based on the intelligence timeline, the shipment consolidation should be underway within the next 3 hours. Our K9 assets will identify any location showing signature patterns identified during preparation. Captain Wells, positioned at the secondary command post with a tactical response team, added, "Once we have confirmation of target location, we move to containment protocols. No direct engagement unless authorized. Our primary objective remains intelligence gathering and network identification." Barrett studied the deployment map with professional intensity, noting the strategic coverage provided by the 3 teams. The operational design was thorough, accounting for all known variables, but the critical unknown factor remained whether the dogs could actually identify the smuggling operations consolidation point without conventional intelligence. "Sergeant Reeves," he asked through the secure channel, "what behavioral indicators are the handlers monitoring?" "We've established a 3-tier response protocol," Meyer replied. "Initial interest is indicated by directional focus and heightened alertness. Confirmed detection triggers sustained orientation behavior and increased pace. Positive target identification will manifest as the full alert pattern we observed during training: fixed position, intensified focus, and the sequential verification behavior. This final element, what handlers called sequential verification, represented the most sophisticated aspect of the K9 unit's capabilities. Rather than simply alerting to a target, these dogs had demonstrated the ability to methodically confirm multiple aspects of a complex scenario, essentially verifying that all components of a threat profile were present before issuing a final alert. The first hour of deployment passed without significant developments. The dogs moved methodically through their assigned sectors, occasionally showing interest in various locations, but never progressing to the second-tier response level. Barrett maintained his position at the monitoring station, studying the dogs' movements with experienced eyes, noting patterns that might escape less seasoned observers. "They're building a complete environmental picture," he observed to Colonel Harrison, who had joined him at the operations center. "Not just following scent trails, but mapping the entire operational area." Harrison studied the monitoring feeds with professional interest. "Explain what you're seeing, Sergeant." "Notice how they're establishing consistent patrol patterns, with deliberate variance in timing and approach angles," Barrett indicated. "That's not standard search behavior. That's tactical area assessment. They're not just looking for targets, they're establishing baseline environmental conditions to more easily identify anomalies." The colonel's skepticism about the operation's unconventional approach had been gradually eroding as he observed the dogs' methodical work. "Is this something they've been specifically trained to do?" "No, sir," Barrett replied, wincing slightly as he adjusted his position to accommodate his healing injuries. "This represents adaptive problem-solving beyond established protocols. They're essentially creating their own search methodology optimized for this specific scenario." As the second hour of deployment began, the operation's momentum suddenly shifted. Storm, working the eastern sector with Specialist Dawson, exhibited a distinct change in behavior, the first-tier response indicator that signaled initial interest in a potential target. Alpha Team reporting preliminary alert behavior. Dawson's voice came through the secure channel. Storm has identified something in Quadrant E7, moving with increased purpose toward the old manufacturing district. Barrett immediately pulled up satellite imagery of the indicated area, a semi-abandoned industrial zone where several warehouses stood partly reclaimed by nature, their original companies long relocated to more modern facilities. The location made strategic sense, close enough to Fort Campbell for convenient access, remote enough to operate without casual observation, with multiple approach and evacuation routes. Maintain distance but don't lose visual contact, Maya instructed Dawson. Let Storm establish the pattern. Bravo and Charlie teams, adjust your search vectors to establish potential containment positions around the E7 quadrant. Within minutes, Storm's behavior escalated to second-tier response, sustained orientation and increased pace toward a specific warehouse at the district's eastern edge. Barrett studied the structure through available satellite imagery, noting features that aligned with operational requirements for the type of transfer they were tracking. Loading docks on two sides, he observed. Clear sight lines for approach surveillance. Minimal neighboring occupancy. It fits the profile. Colonel Harrison nodded in agreement. If they're staging a major transfer, that location offers optimal security and access characteristics. Before they could discuss further tactical considerations, the operation accelerated dramatically. Storm had reached the warehouse perimeter and exhibited the distinctive third-tier alert behavior, fixed position, intensified focus, and the beginning of sequential verification movements. Alpha Team confirming third-tier alert, Dawson reported. His voice controlled, but tension evident. Storm is methodically checking all approach vectors to the target structure, behavior consistent with positive identification protocols. Hold position and maintain surveillance, Meyer instructed. Let's confirm with secondary validation. Almost immediately, the operation dynamics shifted again as both Echo and Viper altered their search patterns, independently orienting toward the same warehouse, despite having no direct communication with Storm or visibility of his position. Bravo Team reporting directional shift, Rodriguez confirmed. Echo has abandoned previous search pattern and is moving directly toward the E7 quadrant at increased speed. Charlie Team confirms the same, added Chen. Viper has altered course, toward identical coordinates. This is independent convergence behavior. The implications were significant. All three dogs had independently identified the same target location through entirely separate search patterns, a convergence that dramatically reduced the possibility of false identification. Barrett leaned forward, studying the real-time video feeds from the handler's equipment. They've got it, he stated with certainty. The simultaneous convergence confirms target verification. All three dogs are exhibiting the same pattern recognition response without cross-communication. Colonel Harrison immediately activated the operation's next phase. Captain Wells, move your tactical team into preliminary containment positions. Maintain stealth protocols. We need visual confirmation of activity before engagement. As the tactical team deployed, Barrett noticed something unprecedented in the K9 behavioral feeds. Rather than maintaining their alert positions, the three dogs had begun coordinating their movements around the warehouse perimeter, establishing what appeared to be a deliberate surveillance pattern that maximized coverage while minimizing detection risk. Are they being directed to establish that perimeter? Harrison asked, noting the sophisticated tactical positioning. Meyer's response conveyed professional amazement. Negative, sir. The handlers are maintaining standoff positions as instructed. The dogs are establishing this surveillance pattern independently. Barrett wasn't entirely surprised. They're adapting to the operational requirements. This goes beyond standard training. They're demonstrating situational intelligence. The tactical implications were significant. The dogs had essentially created their own coordinated surveillance network around the target, positioned at optimal observation points that human planners would have selected for maximum coverage. With minimal exposure, within 20 minutes, their unconventional approach yielded critical intelligence. Storm, positioned near the warehouse's southern loading dock, observed and reported specific activity. 3 unmarked vehicles arriving in sequence, with personnel establishing security positions consistent with military training protocols. Visual confirmation of target activity, Dawson reported. Storm is signaling personnel movement at southern access point. Multiple subjects, disciplined formation, counter-surveillance behaviors consistent with professional training. Captain Wells's tactical team, now in position surrounding the warehouse at a secure distance, provided additional confirmation. Subjects are wearing civilian clothing but moving with military precision. Standard 2x2 cover formations. Coordinated perimeter checks. These aren't amateur operators. Colonel Harrison addressed the command team with calm authority. We have confirmation of activity consistent with the expected transfer operation. Transition to Phase 2, continued surveillance and comprehensive documentation. No intervention until we identify all participants and confirm the presence of the scheduled shipment. For Barrett, watching from the operations center with Titan, attentively positioned beside him, the operational developments validated his unconventional approach. The dogs had not only located the target site with remarkable precision, but had independently established an effective surveillance network that provided critical intelligence while minimizing detection risk. They're doing more than finding targets, he observed to Dr. Washington, who had arrived to check his medical status. They're adapting to the mission requirements in real time, creating tactics optimized for the specific scenario. The physician checked his vital signs while studying the operation feeds with evident curiosity. From a scientific perspective, this represents cognitive processing beyond our current understanding of canine capabilities. They're not just following training, they're demonstrating adaptive problem-solving in novel situations. Barrett nodded, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated his healing ribs. That's why traditional animal behavior models don't fully capture what military working dogs actually do in the field. Their capabilities transcend our conventional categories. As the surveillance operation continued, the dogs maintained their coordinated observation pattern, rotating positions to provide comprehensive coverage while avoiding detection. Their handlers remained at secure distances, monitoring through specialized equipment while maintaining the unconventional command approach that allowed the dogs to direct the operation's tactical execution. The warehouse activity intensified. As dawn approached, more vehicles arriving, equipment being transferred, personnel establishing security protocols consistent with the significant operation. Captain Wells's team documented everything, building a comprehensive intelligence profile of both the operation and its participants. We've identified 14 individuals so far, Wells reported, comparing facial recognition with military personnel databases in real time. 4 confirmed matches with active duty personnel from Fort Campbell, 2 from Fort Knox. The infiltration was even more extensive than Barrett had initially discovered. A sophisticated network extending across multiple military installations, with participants holding various positions of trust and access. As the operation reached a critical juncture, with the main shipment apparently being prepared for transfer, Storm suddenly altered his surveillance behavior. Instead of maintaining his observation position, he began moving toward a specific vehicle that had just arrived, a late-model SUV with darkened windows and civilian plates. Alpha Team reporting change in Storm's focus, Dawson communicated urgently. "He's showing heightened alert behavior directed at the newly arrived vehicle. Driver remains inside. No visual confirmation of identity." Barrett studied the footage with intense concentration. That vehicle arrival pattern is different. No security check, immediate access, others deferring to its position. That's leadership behavior. Colonel Harrison recognized the significance immediately. Priority target identified. Captain Wells, redirect surveillance assets to the new vehicle. We need visual confirmation of the occupant. Before the tactical team could reposition their surveillance equipment, Storm took unprecedented action. Breaking from his established pattern, he moved with stealth toward the vehicle, using available cover to approach within observation distance while remaining undetected by the operation's security personnel. "Alpha Team reporting independent initiative by Storm," Dawson whispered urgently. "He's closed distance to the target vehicle, positioning for direct observation. Should I recall him?" Maya's response was immediate. "Negative. Maintain current position and continue monitoring. Storm has demonstrated situational assessment capabilities throughout this operation. Trust his tactical judgment." The dog's approach proved remarkably effective. He established a position that provided direct line of sight to the vehicle's driver's side window, while remaining concealed from security personnel. When the driver finally emerged, Storm maintained perfect stillness, only his eyes tracking the individual's movements. "Visual on primary subject," Wells reported as her team captured high-resolution images. "Male, approximately 50 years old, carries himself with clear military bearing. Facial recognition running now." Barrett watched intently as the database comparison executed. When the result appeared on his screen, he felt a cold shock of recognition despite having never seen the man before. "Colonel Harrison," he said quietly. "That's Lieutenant Colonel Richard Mercer, Deputy Director of Logistics Operations for the entire Southeastern Command." The implications were staggering. Not a mid-level operative, but a senior officer with access to the highest levels of military, logistics information, security protocols, and deployment schedules. The corruption reached far higher into the command structure than anyone had anticipated. "Confirmation on identification," Wells reported. "Lieutenant Colonel Mercer, currently assigned to Regional Command Headquarters. His position would give him access to everything Barrett described: weapons shipments, personnel files, operational schedules across multiple installations." As this critical intelligence registered, Storm suddenly exhibited intense alert behavior, focusing on a specific cargo being unloaded from one of the trucks. A series of hardened cases consistent with secure intelligence transport protocols. "Visual confirmation on the intelligence packets," Barrett stated, recognizing the distinctive containment systems used for transporting classified materials. "That matches exactly what I overheard during my captivity. Complete operational details." For deployed special operations teams. The operation had reached its decisive moment. They had identified both the network leadership and confirmed the presence of the compromised intelligence materials. With dawn approaching, the transfer would soon be complete, after which the materials would be moved to their final destination beyond their surveillance capabilities. Colonel Harrison made the decisive call. "All teams prepare for intervention. Captain Wells, execute containment protocol. Primary objective is securing those intelligence materials and taking Lieutenant Colonel Mercer into custody. All other targets are secondary priorities." As the tactical team prepared to move, Barrett noticed something extraordinary in the surveillance feeds. All three dogs had silently repositioned to form a coordinated containment formation around the warehouse. Without handler direction, they had anticipated the operation's transition from surveillance to intervention and adapted their positions accordingly. "They know what's coming," he observed to Colonel Harrison. "They've positioned themselves to support the tactical team's approach vectors." The colonel studied the feeds with newfound respect for the unconventional approach Barrett had advocated. They're not just following protocols, they're anticipating operational requirements. As Operation Broken Chain transitioned to its final phase, the extraordinary capabilities of the K9 unit had proven invaluable, locating the target without conventional intelligence support, establishing effective surveillance, identifying key personnel, and confirming the presence of compromised materials. Their performance had validated Barrett's faith in the bond between military working dogs and the soldiers they served, a connection that transcended conventional understanding and operational boundaries. From his position in the operations center, with Titan maintaining his vigilant presence beside him, Barrett watched as the operation he had conceived moved toward its culmination. The dogs that had saved his life had now positioned themselves to protect countless others, a testament to loyalty, intelligence, and courage that defied simple explanation. The final phase was about to begin, bringing Operation Broken Chain to its decisive conclusion and demonstrating once more the extraordinary capabilities of 4 remarkable dogs who had already accomplished what conventional wisdom deemed impossible. As dawn's first light began to filter through the autumn fog surrounding the warehouse district, Operation Broken Chain entered its most critical phase. Captain Wells and her tactical response team moved into final position, establishing a complete containment perimeter around the target facility while maintaining communication silence. The element of surprise remained their greatest tactical advantage against adversaries with professional military training. Inside the operations center, Staff Sergeant Barrett monitored the approaching confrontation with practiced focus, his injured body tense despite the pain medication Dr. Washington had administered during her last check. Beside him, Titan observed the multiple video feeds with unusual attentiveness, his posture shifting subtly as he processed the unfolding tactical situation. 3 minutes to synchronized intervention, Colonel Harrison announced, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. All team leaders confirm final positions and readiness. The confirmation sequence proceeded methodically, 6 tactical elements reporting ready status, medical support standing by, containment teams positioned to intercept any potential escapees. The operation had been meticulously planned despite its rapid development, with contingencies established for various possible resistance scenarios. Barrett's attention remained fixed on the 3 Belgian Malinois visible on separate video feeds. Without handler direction, they had positioned themselves at critical access points around the warehouse. Storm covering the main loading dock, where Lieutenant Colonel Mercer continued to oversee the transfer operation, Echo monitoring the northern personnel entrance, and Viper maintaining surveillance of the eastern vehicle access point. "The dogs have established optimal containment positions," Barrett noted to Colonel Harrison. "They've essentially created blocking points at all viable escape routes, positioned just out of visual range of the warehouse security." Harrison studied the tactical display with newfound appreciation for the K9 unit's capabilities. They've anticipated the intervention approach vectors without being included in that planning. "They're reading the overall tactical situation," Barrett explained, "integrating environmental factors, target behavior patterns, and operational objectives into a coherent response strategy. This goes beyond training. They're demonstrating situational intelligence." The colonel made a final assessment of the operational readiness, then gave the command that set the intervention in motion. "All units execute containment protocol. Priority targets are the intelligence materials and Lieutenant Colonel Mercer. Minimum force, maximum control." What followed was a precisely choreographed tactical operation. 6 teams converging simultaneously on the warehouse from multiple angles, using specialized entry techniques to breach access points before the targets could organize effective resistance. Captain Wells led the primary team targeting the loading dock where Mercer and the intelligence materials were located. As the tactical teams initiated their approach, the 3 Belgian Malinois moved with extraordinary coordination. Without handler commands, they transitioned from surveillance to active containment mode, positioning themselves to intercept anyone attempting to flee the tactical response. K9 assets are self-deploying to containment positions, Maya reported. From her command vehicle, professional amazement evident in her voice. No handler direction provided, they're reading the tactical flow and responding appropriately. Inside the warehouse, the initial moments of the intervention unfolded with textbook precision. The tactical teams secured entry points, established control zones, and began detaining personnel before organized resistance could form. Most of the smuggling operation participants recognized the overwhelming tactical advantage and surrendered without significant resistance. Lieutenant Colonel Mercer, however, demonstrated the quick decision-making that had likely facilitated his rise through military ranks. Recognizing the tactical situation within seconds of the breach, he immediately moved toward a secondary exit. A maintenance door on the warehouse's southwestern corner that had not been identified in the facility's outdated blueprints. Primary target is moving to possible extraction point, reported a tactical team member who had visual contact. Southwestern corner appears to be an unmarked exit. Barrett immediately checked the surveillance feeds, confirming that the area had minimal coverage from the tactical teams due to the unexpected exit point. That section wasn't in the facility documentation. He knows the building layout better than our intelligence indicated. Before Colonel Harrison could redirect assets to intercept, something remarkable appeared on the video feed. Storm, operating without handler direction, had already anticipated Mercer's escape route and was moving to intercept, navigating through the complex environment with extraordinary speed and tactical awareness. Alpha K9 is moving to intercept the primary target, Maya reported, watching Storm's tracker signal. No command issued. He's responding to the tactical situation in real time. Barrett watched with professional admiration as Storm positioned himself along Mercer's likely escape path, using available cover to remain undetected while establishing an optimal interdiction position. The dog's tactical movement reflected sophisticated understanding of both the physical environment and human behavior patterns under pressure. He's not just chasing a fleeing target, Barrett observed to Colonel Harrison. He's anticipating Mercer's most likely movement path and establishing an interception point ahead of his arrival. Within moments, the effectiveness of Storm's tactical assessment became clear. As Mercer emerged from the concealed exit, moving rapidly toward a secondary vehicle positioned for emergency extraction, Storm executed a perfectly timed interdiction. The Belgian Malinois emerged from concealment directly in Mercer's path, his stance and vocalization communicating clear threat without immediate attack. Mercer froze momentarily, then made a critical error in judgment. Rather than surrendering to the K9 interdiction, he drew a concealed sidearm, a direct threat that triggered Storm's full apprehension protocol. The dog launched forward with controlled aggression, targeting Mercer's weapon arm with precision that reflected years of specialized training. The engagement was brief but decisive. Storm neutralized the armed threat without excessive force, disabling Mercer's weapon arm while avoiding critical injury. The lieutenant colonel went down with a pained shout, the firearm skittering away across the pavement as Storm maintained control through a trained hold that prevented further resistance without causing unnecessary harm. Primary target neutralized by Alpha K9, reported Specialist Dawson, arriving seconds later to secure Mercer. Suspect attempted to draw weapon, but was disarmed and contained with standard apprehension techniques. Medical assessment required for bite wounds to right forearm, but no critical injuries. Throughout the warehouse complex, similar scenarios played out as the operation achieved its objectives with remarkable efficiency. Echo intercepted 2 operatives attempting to flee through the northern exit, while Viper prevented a vehicle from departing the eastern access point by targeting its tires with precise intervention techniques. Within 17 minutes of the initial breach, Operation Broken Chain had achieved complete containment. 14 suspects were in custody, including 6 active-duty military personnel whose positions had facilitated the smuggling network's operations. Most significantly, the intelligence materials had been secured intact, preventing the compromise of numerous special operations teams and their missions. In the operations center, Barrett watched the successful conclusion with profound relief tempered by professional assessment. Tactical execution was nearly flawless, he noted to Colonel Harrison. The K9 unit's contribution was the critical factor in achieving complete containment. Without their independent tactical initiative, at least 3 high-value targets, including Mercer, would likely have escaped. Harrison nodded in agreement, his initial skepticism about the unconventional approach completely dissolved. Their performance exceeded every established protocol and capability metric. This warrants comprehensive documentation for future operational development. As the tactical teams began processing detainees and securing evidence, Barrett's attention shifted to a concerning development. The video feed showing Storm after his successful apprehension of Mercer revealed subtle but alarming indicators. The dog was exhibiting signs of physical distress despite showing no obvious injuries. "Something's wrong with Storm," Barrett stated, leaning forward despite his painful injuries. His breathing pattern is off, and his coordination shows subtle irregularities. Maya, who had joined Specialist Dawson after the successful apprehension, confirmed Barrett's observation through the communication channel. "Medical team, we need veterinary support at the southwestern containment area immediately. Storm is showing symptoms consistent with potential chemical exposure." Dr. Collins, the military veterinarian assigned to the operation, responded immediately. "What symptoms are you observing?" "Increased respiratory rate, mild disorientation, slight muscular tremors," Maya reported professionally, though concern edged her voice. "No obvious external injuries, but symptoms developed rapidly after apprehending the primary target." Barrett's mind raced through possibilities, connecting his own experience with the current situation. "Colonel, when they interrogated me, they used a specialized chemical compound to increase pain sensitivity. The compound was absorbed through skin contact." Harrison grasped the implication immediately. Mercer may have been carrying a similar compound as a defensive measure against K9 interdiction. Contact during apprehension could have exposed Storm to the substance. "Exactly," Barrett confirmed, turning to address Dr. Washington, who had returned to monitor his condition. "Doctor, the compound they used on me, what was its chemical classification based on your analysis?" The physician consulted her tablet, reviewing Barrett's medical data. "A sophisticated derivative of parasympathomimetic agents, designed for transdermal absorption. Similar compounds have been documented in specialized military applications, though this specific formulation wasn't in our database." Barrett relayed this information to the veterinary team, now attending to Storm at the containment site. Dr. Collins processed the information quickly, adapting her treatment approach to address the suspected chemical exposure. "Administering atropine and specialized counteragent," she reported after examining Storm. "If it's the compound you've described, we should see improvement within minutes. Fortunately, the exposure appears limited, likely residual agent on Mercer's clothing. rather than concentrated application. Barrett watched anxiously as the medical team treated Storm, Titan pressing closer against his side as if sensing his concern. The connection between handlers and their canine partners transcended professional relationships. These dogs were not equipment, but essential team members who routinely placed themselves at risk to protect their human counterparts. After several tense minutes, Dr. Collins provided the update everyone had been waiting for. Storm is responding well to treatment, vital signs stabilizing, neurological symptoms receding. We'll continue monitoring, but prognosis is excellent. For full recovery, the relief in the operations center was palpable. While the overall mission had achieved remarkable success, the potential loss of Storm would have cast a shadow over the accomplishment. These extraordinary dogs had been the cornerstone of the operation's success, demonstrating capabilities that defied conventional expectations and operational parameters. As the containment phase transitioned to evidence collection and processing, Barrett found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From his discovery of the smuggling operation to his capture and torture, from the miraculous rescue by dogs who should never have found him to the development of an unconventional operation built around their remarkable capabilities, the entire sequence represented a testament to bonds that transcended ordinary understanding. Colonel Harrison approached Barrett's monitoring station, his typically stoic expression showing rare emotion. "Sergeant, your unconventional approach has prevented a catastrophic intelligence breach that would have endangered numerous special operations teams. The dogs performed beyond any reasonable expectation." "They did what we trained them to do, sir," Barrett replied modestly. "We just had to trust their capabilities beyond our conventional parameters." Harrison shook his head slightly. "What they demonstrated goes beyond training, Sergeant. Their adaptive decision-making, tactical assessment, and coordinated response represented something more fundamental, something worth studying further when this operation concludes." As the colonel returned to supervising the evidence processing, Maya's voice came through the communication channel, directed specifically to Barrett. "Thought you'd want to know. Storm is already back on his feet, monitoring the containment area despite medical recommendation for rest. Apparently, he's as stubborn as another soldier I know." Barrett smiled despite his physical discomfort, reaching down to rest his hand on Titan's head. "Military working dogs don't understand the concept of standing down when the mission isn't complete. It's not in their operational vocabulary." The operation continued throughout the morning as evidence was catalogued, suspects processed, and intelligence materials secured for comprehensive analysis. The extent of the network's reach became increasingly apparent. Compromised personnel across multiple installations, sophisticated operational security measures, and connections to international arms dealers that would require extensive counterintelligence resources to fully unravel. Most disturbing was the confirmation of Barrett's initial discovery. The intelligence materials being prepared for transfer included detailed operational plans for 7 different special operations teams currently deployed overseas. Had this information reached its intended recipients, the consequences would have been devastating: compromised missions, endangered personnel, and potentially significant casualties among America's most elite fighting forces. By midday, as Operation Broken Chain transitioned to its final phase, the full impact of the K9 unit's contribution had become undeniable. Without their extraordinary capabilities, the operation would likely have failed to intercept the transfer in time, with catastrophic consequences for deployed personnel who would never have known why their missions suddenly encountered unexpected resistance. Barrett, finally agreeing to return to medical care after the operation's critical phases were complete, made one non-negotiable request: that Titan and the other dogs receive full recognition in all official reports and commendations. These remarkable animals had demonstrated capabilities beyond established parameters, saving countless lives through their extraordinary blend of training, instinct, and inexplicable connection to the humans they served alongside. As he was being prepared for transport back to the medical facility, Barrett had one final moment with Maya and the K9 unit, now reunited after their successful field operation. Despite their exhaustion, the dogs maintained alert postures, their mission focus undiminished by the morning's intense activities. "They found me when conventional methods failed," Barrett said quietly to Maya. "Then they found a threat that had evaded our security systems for months. Most importantly, they found a way to protect people they've never met, but recognized as part of their extended pack, their fellow service members." Maya nodded, professional pride evident in her expression. "They operate beyond our understanding sometimes. We train them with sophisticated techniques, but what they give in return, their loyalty, their instincts, their capacity for connection, transcends anything we could program." As the medical transport prepared to depart, Barrett looked at the 4 Belgian Malinois who had fundamentally changed his understanding of the bond between humans and the remarkable animals who served alongside them. Their story wouldn't make headlines or receive public recognition due to the classified nature of the operation, but among those who knew, their accomplishment would become legendary, a testament to loyalty, courage, and connections that defied conventional explanation. The operation that began with an impossible rescue had concluded with an unprecedented success, all because 4 extraordinary dogs had demonstrated that some bonds transcend time, distance, and human understanding, a truth that would forever change how military working dogs were valued, trained, and integrated into operations where conventional approaches proved insufficient. As Barrett was transported away, Titan maintaining his now familiar position beside him, he knew with absolute certainty that their story was far from over. The connection they had established would continue to evolve, creating possibilities that extended beyond current operational parameters and challenging fundamental assumptions about the relationship between handlers and the remarkable animals, who served alongside them with such extraordinary courage, intelligence, and loyalty. 2 weeks after Operation Broken Chain's successful conclusion, the Fort Campbell Recovery Center presented a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere of the Intelligence Operations Room. Autumn sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating a purpose-built rehabilitation facility where injured service members worked to rebuild their strength, mobility, and confidence under expert guidance. Staff Sergeant James Barrett navigated the parallel bars with determined concentration, his movements measured but increasingly fluid as healing progressed. The medical team had initially projected a 3-month recovery timeline given the extent of his injuries, but Barrett's extraordinary determination had accelerated his progress significantly. Dr. Washington monitored his session from nearby, making notes on his remarkable improvement while trying to conceal her amazement at his recovery rate. "Your tissue regeneration is proceeding at nearly twice the expected pace," she commented, as Barrett completed his final repetition. "Particularly impressive, considering the systemic trauma your body endured." Barrett lowered himself carefully into the wheelchair, still required for longer distances, muscles trembling from exertion, but satisfaction evident in his expression. "The human body has remarkable resilience when properly motivated, Doctor." That motivation was clearly visible at the rehabilitation center's entrance, where Titan waited patiently, his attentive posture never wavering despite the lengthy therapy session. The Belgian Malinois had been formally assigned as Barrett's rehabilitation support animal, a designation that barely scratched the surface of the profound connection they had established. "Your 4-legged motivational coach certainly contributes to your progress," Dr. Washington acknowledged, having witnessed how Barrett consistently pushed harder when Titan observed his therapy sessions. though I'm still documenting the physiological changes we're observing when he's present during your treatments. These changes had become a source of scientific curiosity for the medical team. Measurable differences in Barrett's pain tolerance, stress hormone levels, and even localized inflammation when Titan maintained physical contact during particularly challenging therapeutic procedures. The dog's presence seemed to activate healing responses that transcended standard medical expectations. Initial results from our comparative analysis are remarkable, Dr. Washington continued as they moved toward the center's garden area for Barrett's scheduled rest period. Your inflammatory markers decreased by nearly 40% when Titan maintains contact during treatment. We're still determining whether it's a neurological response to the psychological comfort or something more direct. Barrett smiled slightly. Perhaps some things aren't meant to be fully quantified, Doctor. Indigenous healing traditions have incorporated animal connections for thousands of years. Maybe they understood something our modern approaches are only beginning to recognize. As they reached the garden, they found Sergeant Maya Reeves waiting with Colonel Harrison. The operation's successful conclusion had elevated both their professional standings, Maya receiving commendation for her innovative canine handling approach, and Harrison recognized for authorizing the unconventional methodology that had prevented a catastrophic intelligence breach. Sergeant Barrett, Harrison greeted formally, though his typically stern expression had softened somewhat since the operation. Your recovery progress is impressive. Thank you, sir, Barrett replied. Motivation makes an enormous difference in rehabilitation outcomes. Speaking of motivation, Maya interjected, I thought you might appreciate an update on our unit. Storm has completely recovered from his chemical exposure. Medical cleared him for full duty last week. Barrett nodded appreciatively. And the operational changes you mentioned? That's partially why we're here, Colonel Harrison explained. The Joint Special Operations Command has authorized the establishment of a specialized K9 Advanced Capabilities Division focusing on developing the unconventional methodologies demonstrated during Operation Broken Chain. The implications were significant. Official recognition of capabilities that extended beyond established parameters, with resources dedicated to understanding and enhancing the extraordinary potential military working dogs had demonstrated. The program will integrate elements from multiple disciplines, Harrison continued, veterinary science, tactical operations, behavioral psychology, and rehabilitative medicine. Your experience with Titan has opened new possibilities for how we understand and utilize the connection between handlers and their K9 partners. Barrett glanced toward Titan, who maintained his vigilant position nearby. The connection goes deeper than our current models acknowledge. These aren't just assets with specialized training. They're partners capable of judgment, initiative, and understanding that transcends our traditional communication frameworks. Maya nodded in agreement. Storm's actions during the operation demonstrated tactical assessment capabilities we've never formally recognized in our training programs. He didn't just follow commands. He anticipated threats, adapted to changing conditions, and made independent decisions aligned with mission objectives. Which brings us to the second purpose of our visit, Harrison added. Once you're medically cleared for limited duty, we'd like you to join the development team as a subject matter expert. Your unique perspective, both as the catalyst for the operation and as someone experiencing an extraordinary recovery connection with Titan, would be invaluable to the program's evolution. The offer represented more than professional recognition. It offered purpose that aligned perfectly with Barrett's transformative experience. From his discovery of the smuggling operation to his miraculous rescue and the subsequent operational success, each step had deepened his understanding of the profound connection possible between humans and the remarkable animals who served alongside them. I'd be honored, sir, Barrett replied without hesitation. though I should note that my perspective has fundamentally changed through this experience. I don't see myself as Titan's handler anymore. We're partners in a process of mutual growth and understanding. As their meeting concluded and the Colonel departed for other obligations, Maya lingered to share more personal updates. The changes extend beyond formal programs, she explained, walking beside Barrett as he navigated his wheelchair along the garden path, with Titan following attentively. The operational success has shifted how other divisions perceive K9 capabilities. Even traditional training units are incorporating elements from our approach. Barrett appreciated the broader impact, but remained focused on the more immediate transformation, the one he experienced daily through his connection with Titan. The dogs recognized something fundamental that our sophisticated systems missed. They found me when conventional approaches failed, identified threats our security protocols overlooked, and demonstrated judgment that transcended their training parameters. They paused beside a small reflecting pool, where late autumn sunlight danced across the surface. Barrett carefully shifted from his wheelchair to a stone bench, Titan immediately positioning himself alongside, their communication wordless yet clear. "I've been reviewing the research from various traditions," Barrett continued, drawing from readings that had occupied his recovery periods. Native American healing practices, Asian therapeutic systems, even European service animal traditions, dating back centuries. They all recognize something modern approaches often overlook, that the connection between humans and animals can facilitate healing and capabilities that transcend our individual limitations. Maya considered this thoughtfully. Our training methods focus on developing specific capabilities through structured protocols. What we witnessed during the operation suggests something more fundamental, an adaptive intelligence and connection that emerges when we allow these extraordinary animals to express their full potential. Exactly, Barrett agreed. We've been so focused on training specific behaviors that we've overlooked their capacity for judgment, intuition, and connection. Titan didn't find me because of his training. He found me because something deeper connected us across time and distance. As if acknowledging the discussion, Titan shifted slightly, resting his head against Barrett's leg, the same position he had maintained during the most painful medical procedures, when his presence seemed to fundamentally alter Barrett's physiological response to treatment. "The medical team is documenting measurable changes in my healing response when he maintains contact," Barrett explained. "Reduced inflammation, accelerated tissue regeneration, increased pain tolerance, changes they can't fully explain through conventional mechanisms." "Synthetes," Maya nodded, unsurprised. "During deployment, we documented similar phenomena with injured handlers, whose K9 partners remained with them during field treatment. The medics called it the battle buddy effect. Improved outcomes they couldn't explain through standard medical protocols." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Jessica Wells, who had led the tactical team during Operation Broken Chain. Her expression conveyed significant news before she spoke. "The intelligence analysis from the operation has been completed," she reported after exchanging greetings. "The network extended further than we initially estimated. 27 compromised personnel across 4 installations, with connections to 3 different international arms dealers." Barrett had anticipated substantial findings, but was still sobered by the scale. "And the intelligence materials we intercepted?" "Comprehensive operational details for 7 different special operations teams," Wells confirmed grimly. "Had that information reached its intended recipients, we would have potentially lost entire units without ever understanding how they were compromised." The weight of what they had prevented settled over the conversation. Not just a weapons smuggling operation, but a catastrophic intelligence breach that would have endangered countless lives and compromised critical national security operations. Lieutenant Colonel Mercer is cooperating with investigators, Wells continued. Apparently, nearly being taken down by storm made a significant impression on his risk assessment calculations. His testimony has helped identify additional network elements we wouldn't have discovered otherwise. Barrett smiled slightly at this detail. The Belgian Malinois' decisive interdiction had not only prevented Mercer's escape, but had ultimately facilitated a broader resolution through his subsequent cooperation. Even in this indirect way, the dog's contribution continued to yield results beyond initial expectations. As Captain Wells departed to continue her investigation, Barrett reflected on the extraordinary journey from his initial discovery to the present moment. His body still carried significant evidence of the torture he had endured: healing scars, recovering fractures, lingering pain that medication could only partially address. Yet alongside these physical reminders of trauma, he had gained something profound, a transformed understanding of connection, resilience, and potential that transcended his previous conception of possibilities. We begin a new phase of training. Next week, Maya mentioned as their conversation continued, building on what we witnessed during the operation, creating spaces for the dogs to demonstrate capabilities beyond our established parameters rather than constraining them to predetermined response patterns. Barrett nodded approvingly. That's the key distinction. Traditional approaches view training as programming specific responses to specific stimuli. What we witnessed suggests something fundamentally different, that these extraordinary animals possess adaptive intelligence that flourishes when we create frameworks that allow for independence, judgment, and connection. As evening approached, bringing a chill to the autumn air, Barrett prepared for his return to the medical center. His recovery continued to progress ahead of projections, with doctors now discussing the possibility of transitioning to outpatient status within weeks rather than months. The colonel mentioned something else before he left, Maya noted as she helped gather Barrett's therapy equipment. They're developing a specialized facility for the new K9 Advanced Capabilities Division, integrating training areas, research spaces, and rehabilitation resources in a single location. Your input on the design would be valuable, particularly regarding the integration of therapeutic elements. The opportunity represented perfect alignment between Barrett's experience and evolving purpose, creating environments where the extraordinary potential he had witnessed could be systematically developed, understood, and integrated into operational capabilities. I'd welcome the opportunity, he replied. What we've experienced points toward possibilities that extend far beyond current models, not just for military applications, but potentially for medical treatment, psychological recovery, and rehabilitation approaches for injured service members. Dan, as they moved toward the center entrance where transportation waited, Barrett reflected on the transformation that continued to unfold, not just his physical recovery or professional evolution, but a fundamental shift in how he understood the connection between humans and the remarkable animals who served alongside them. From the moment Titan had somehow found him against impossible odds, through the operation that had prevented a catastrophic intelligence breach, to the accelerated healing he now experienced through their deepening connection, each phase had revealed dimensions of possibility that transcended conventional understanding. We don't have adequate language for what we've witnessed, Barrett observed as they reached the entrance. Our scientific frameworks struggle to categorize phenomena that indigenous traditions have recognized for thousands of years, that the boundary between humans and animals is more permeable, more dynamic, more filled with potential than our modern approaches acknowledge. Maya smiled, recognizing the philosophical depth that had emerged through Barrett's experience. Perhaps that's the most valuable outcome of all this. Not just the operational success or the new division, but a fundamental reconsideration of what's possible when we open ourselves to connections and capabilities beyond our established parameters. As Barrett transferred to the transport vehicle with Titan maintaining his vigilant presence, he carried with him not just the physical reminders of trauma survived, but the profound awareness of transformation still unfolding. What had begun as a routine investigation had evolved into an extraordinary journey of discovery, one that continued to reveal new dimensions of connection, capability, and potential with each passing day. The dogs who had found him against impossible odds had initiated more than a rescue. They had catalyzed a fundamental reconsideration of possibilities that extended far beyond military applications. From Titan's inexplicable ability to locate him across time and distance to Storm's remarkable tactical judgment during the operation, these extraordinary animals had demonstrated capabilities that challenged conventional understanding and opened new frontiers of possibility. As the transport departed, Barrett reflected on the most profound lesson of his journey, that transformation often emerges from our greatest challenges, revealing connections and capabilities we never imagined possible until circumstances required us to see beyond our limited understanding of what can be. Spring arrived at Fort Campbell with vibrant energy, transforming the landscape with fresh greenery and blooming wildflowers that created a striking contrast to the specialized training facility nestled at the base's northwestern edge. The K9 Advanced Capabilities Division had moved from concept to reality in just 4 months, a testament to the priority placed on developing the unconventional methodologies demonstrated during Operation Broken Chain. Staff Sergeant James Barrett surveyed the main training arena from the elevated observation platform, pride evident in his expression as he watched 6 handler dog teams navigating a complex scenario designed to encourage independent problem-solving. His physical recovery had progressed remarkably, walking now with only a slight limp that doctors assured would continue to improve with time. The scars from his ordeal remained visible on his exposed forearms, but they had become symbols of survival rather than reminders of trauma. They're showing significant improvement in adaptive response patterns, observed Dr. Emily Chen, the behavioral psychologist who had joined the division to study the cognitive processes underlying the dog's remarkable capabilities. Particularly, the Belgian Malinois team. They're demonstrating situational assessment skills that exceed our established metrics. Barrett nodded in agreement, watching as the dogs collaborated to overcome a challenge that would typically require handler direction. They're not just executing commands, they're understanding objectives and developing approach strategies based on environmental conditions. The transformation in military working dog training philosophy had been profound since Operation Broken Chain. Traditional approaches emphasized handler direction and consistent response patterns. The new methodology created frameworks for dogs to demonstrate independent judgment within mission parameters, recognizing their capacity for tactical assessment and adaptive problem-solving. The data supports your observational assessment, Dr. Chen confirmed, reviewing metrics on her tablet. Response variability under changing conditions has increased by 47%, while successful outcome achievement remains consistent. At 93%, they're developing individualized approaches rather than standardized responses. From a nearby training compartment came excited voices as a different team achieved a breakthrough moment. Barrett and Dr. Chen moved to observe as Maya worked with Storm and 2 newer handler-dog partnerships on scent discrimination exercises of unprecedented complexity. Perfect execution, Meyer exclaimed, as a young German shepherd named Ranger successfully identified a specific chemical compound hidden among 17 similar substances. He maintained discrimination integrity despite multiple confounding elements. The exercise represented a quantum leap beyond traditional explosive detection training. Rather than simply alerting to known compounds, these dogs were learning to identify specific molecular components within complex mixtures, a capability with profound implications for everything from counterterrorism operations to medical screening. Storm helped design this training protocol, Meyer explained, as Barrett and Dr. Chen joined them. His response patterns to the compound matrix revealed discrimination capabilities our traditional approaches never accessed. This represented another paradigm shift in their evolving methodology, recognizing that the dogs themselves could inform training development through their natural capabilities and problem-solving approaches. Rather than imposing human-designed frameworks exclusively, the new protocols created space for canine intelligence to help shape the learning process. The medical applications continue to expand as well, Dr. Chen noted. The oncology research team reports their canine screening trials are showing 89% accuracy in early-stage detection, significantly higher than our most advanced technological screening methods. Barrett wasn't surprised by these developments. Since joining the division's development team, he had consistently advocated for exploring applications beyond military operations, recognizing that the extraordinary sensory and cognitive capabilities demonstrated by these dogs could transform fields ranging from medicine to disaster response. "How are the rehabilitation integration trials progressing?" he asked, referencing a program particularly close to his personal experience. Dr. Chen's expression brightened further. Exceeding all projections, the veterans participating in the Animal Integrated Rehabilitation Program are showing recovery rates approximately 30% higher than control groups using standard protocols. The physiological response patterns mirror what was documented during your recovery. This program represented Barrett's most personal contribution to the division's evolution, creating systematic approaches for integrating working dogs into rehabilitation programs for injured service members. The physiological and psychological benefits documented during his own recovery had provided the foundational evidence for developing these protocols. As they continued their observation tour, Barrett's phone signaled an incoming message from Colonel Harrison. The request was brief but significant, a meeting to discuss expansion of the program beyond Fort Campbell to 3 additional military installations, including an international partnership with allied forces. "Validation from the highest levels," Barrett commented to Dr. Chen after sharing the message. What began as an unconventional approach to a specific operational challenge is evolving into a transformative methodology with applications across military and civilian domains. Their tour continued to the division's most innovative section, the Intuitive Communication Lab, where researchers worked to better understand and facilitate the extraordinary connections demonstrated between handlers and their canine partners. Here, Titan participated in a sequence of experiments designed to measure subtle physiological synchronization between him and Barrett under various conditions. Dr. Sophia Patel, the neurophysiologist leading this research, greeted them enthusiastically. "James, perfect timing. We've just processed the comparative analysis from yesterday's sessions. The results are remarkable." She displayed a series of waveform patterns on the main monitor, parallel measurements of neurological activity, heart rate, variability, and stress hormone levels from both Barrett and Titan during simulated high-stress scenarios. "The synchronization patterns defy conventional explanation," she explained, highlighting matching response signatures across multiple physiological systems. When you and Titan are working in close proximity, your biological systems essentially harmonize. Stress responses moderate, immune markers optimize, and neurological patterns show coherence, typically only observed in long-term human partnerships. Barrett had experienced this synchronization subjectively throughout his recovery, but seeing it quantified in scientific terms provided validation beyond anecdotal understanding. The connection he shared with Titan transcended conventional handler-canine relationships, representing a bond that fundamentally altered physiological functioning in both of them. We're documenting similar patterns across other established partnerships, Dr. Patel continued, though none quite as pronounced as yours. The duration and intensity of your initial connection experience seems to have established neurological pathways that facilitate exceptional synchronization. You mean, when they found me, Barrett stated simply. Exactly. That extraordinary circumstance, Titan locating you against impossible odds, maintaining protective vigilance throughout your evacuation and medical treatment, appears to have created a foundational bond that continues to strengthen through ongoing interaction. As they discussed the implications, Maya joined them after completing her training session, Storm following attentively at her side. The Belgian Malinois acknowledged Titan with subtle communication that the researchers had learned to recognize as complex social interaction rather than simple acknowledgement. The Secretary of the Army is visiting next week, Maya mentioned after greetings were exchanged. Apparently, our results have generated interest at the highest levels of military leadership. Barrett received this news with measured satisfaction. Official recognition meant resources, expansion opportunities, and broader implementation of their developing methodologies. But it also meant increased scrutiny and potential pressure to quantify capabilities that sometimes defied conventional measurement. We'll need to demonstrate concrete applications while acknowledging the aspects of these relationships that transcend standard metrics, he noted. It's a delicate balance between scientific validation and recognizing phenomena that challenge our existing frameworks. Dr. Patel nodded in agreement. That's why we're developing multidimensional assessment protocols, acknowledging that some aspects of these connections can be measured, while others can only be observed and documented as emergent phenomena. As their professional discussion continued, Barrett noticed something remarkable, yet increasingly familiar: the subtle but unmistakable synchronization of the four beings present in the lab. Titan and Storm had positioned themselves in complementary locations that optimized spatial awareness, while he and Maya unconsciously mirrored each other's posture and breathing patterns. They had become a coordinated unit through months of collaborative work, developing connections that transcended conventional team dynamics. The most significant outcome of this program isn't just enhanced tactical capabilities or accelerated rehabilitation, Barrett observed. It's a fundamental reconsideration of how we understand the relationship between humans and the animals who share our world and work. This philosophical dimension had become increasingly central to Barrett's evolving perspective. His journey from conventional military logistics officer to advocate for revolutionary approaches to human-animal partnership represented a profound transformation, one that continued to reveal new dimensions of possibility with each research, breakthrough and training innovation. Later that afternoon, Barrett met with a group of veterans newly enrolled in the rehabilitation program. Service members facing recovery challenges similar to those he had navigated following his rescue. Their injuries ranged from combat trauma to training accidents, but all shared the daunting path of rebuilding physical capabilities and psychological resilience after life-altering experiences. The program you're beginning represents a fundamental You shift in how we approach rehabilitation, Barrett explained as they gathered in the center's orientation space. Rather than focusing exclusively on your individual recovery, we're creating partnership-based healing, recognizing that certain physiological and psychological challenges respond better to collaborative processes. The skepticism evident in some expressions was familiar, the same doubt Barrett had initially harbored before experiencing the extraordinary impact of Titan's presence during his own recovery. Rather than attempting to overcome this skepticism with explanations, he simply introduced the specially selected and trained rehabilitation partners who entered the room with their handlers. The transformation was immediate and visible. Tension, yielding to curiosity, defensive postures softening as the dogs moved with gentle confidence among the veterans. Without prompting, each animal seemed to identify the individual most in need of their particular energy and approach. Some offering exuberant greeting, while others maintained respectful distance, each response perfectly calibrated to the specific person's emotional state. "They're reading you," Barrett explained as the initial interactions unfolded. "Not just your physical condition, but your emotional and psychological state. The partnership we're establishing isn't about dependency or assistance in the conventional sense. It's about creating a healing connection that activates recovery capabilities you already possess, but might struggle to access independently." As he observed these initial connections forming, Barrett reflected on his own journey from the moment Titan had found him chained and near death to their current partnership, developing revolutionary approaches that benefited others facing similar challenges. The transformation had not erased the trauma he had experienced, but had integrated it into a life of expanded purpose and deeper understanding. "The program has 3 integrated components," he continued, explaining the methodology they had developed. "Physical rehabilitation enhanced through partnership presence, psychological resilience building through connection experiences, and neurophysiological synchronization that demonstrably accelerates tissue healing and functional recovery." One young sergeant with extensive leg injuries asked the question Barrett had anticipated. "With respect, Sergeant Barrett, this sounds more like alternative therapy than evidence-based treatment. What makes this different from standard service animal programs?" Barrett appreciated the directness. "The distinction lies in the physiological mechanisms we've documented. These aren't emotional support animals or conventional service dogs. They're partners specially selected and trained to facilitate specific neurobiological responses that accelerate healing through documented biochemical pathways." He activated the room's display system, showing comparative healing metrics from the program's initial cohorts. Participants in the partnership program showed 43% faster tissue regeneration, 37% greater inflammation reduction, and 51% improved pain management with reduced medication dependence compared to control groups receiving standard rehabilitation. These numbers represented more than statistical validation. They reflected the real experiences of service members who had discovered, as Barrett had, that recovery could be fundamentally transformed through partnerships that transcended conventional understanding of human-animal relationships. As the orientation session concluded and participants began their initial assessment protocols with medical staff, Barrett stepped outside to the center's meditation garden, where Titan waited patiently. The Belgian Malinois acknowledged his arrival, with subtle shifts in posture that communicated recognition and connection without needless movement. "Another group beginning their journey," Barrett commented as he settled beside his partner, feeling the familiar synchronization of their breathing and heart rates that researchers had documented so extensively. Each one facing challenges that seem insurmountable until they discover capacities they didn't know they possessed. Titan's response wasn't verbal, but energetic. a quality of presence that Barrett had learned to recognize as active engagement rather than simple companionship. Their communication had evolved beyond conventional handler-canine interaction into something researchers were still working to categorize and understand, a partnership that operated through multiple channels simultaneously, some measurable through instrumentation and others perceptible only through lived experience. As spring sunlight warmed the garden and new growth emerged from soil recently frozen, Barrett reflected on the parallel between seasonal renewal and the transformation journey he continued to navigate. What had begun in trauma and near death had blossomed into expanded purpose and deeper understanding, not erasing the difficult experience, but integrating it into a life of greater meaning and contribution. The K9 Advanced Capabilities Division represented more than institutional validation of unconventional methodologies. It embodied a fundamental reconsideration of possibilities, recognition that some of our most profound healing and growth emerges through connections that transcend conventional boundaries between species, between established protocols and emergent capabilities, between what we think we know and what we're still discovering about the extraordinary potential that exists when we remain open to unexpected possibilities. As new participants began their journey of partnership-based recovery inside the center, Barrett and Titan remained in quiet communion in the garden, living embodiments of the transformation possible when traumatic experience becomes the catalyst for discovery rather than the definition of limitation. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.